The sound of chains rattling in the pre-dawn cold made Idris Irvine pause on the muddy road, his worn leather boots sinking into the ruts left by merchant wagons. He had been walking since midnight, trying to reach the nearest town before his coin ran out entirely, when he heard the unmistakable sound of iron shackles and rough voices barking orders. Curiosity and an old soldier's instinct made him step off the road and peer through the bare winter trees toward the commotion. What he saw made his stomach turn. A line of perhaps 20 figures stood chained together in the gray morning light, their breath misting in the frigid air. Most were orcs, their green skin stark against the snow-dusted ground, though a few goblins and what looked like a half-troll rounded out the miserable group. They were contract slaves, he realized, bound to labor for whoever owned their papers. The practice was legal in these frontier territories, though it left a bitter taste in his mouth. He had seen too much cruelty in his 32 years, especially during his time in the border wars, to feel anything but disgust at the sight. The slave trader was a fat man with a red face and breath that probably reeked of cheap whiskey, even from a distance. He strutted along the line like a farmer inspecting livestock, occasionally striking one of the chained figures with a short rod when they did not stand straight enough for his liking. Idris watched as the man stopped before an orc woman near the end of the line. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with the characteristic green skin and small tusks that marked her kind. Her black hair was matted and dirty, hanging past her shoulders, and her clothing was little more than rags that did nothing to protect her from the cold. But what struck Idris most were her eyes. Even from his hiding spot, he could see the defiance there, burning like coals despite her obvious exhaustion and mistreatment. The trader said something Idris could not hear, and the orc woman spat at his feet. The response was immediate and brutal. The trader's rod came down across her shoulders once, twice, 3 times, and though she flinched, she did not cry out or fall. Her jaw remained set, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond her tormentor. Idris found himself moving before he had made a conscious decision. He stepped out of the trees and onto the road, his hand instinctively checking for the sword that no longer hung at his hip. He had sold it 2 months ago when the money ran out. All he had now was a belt knife and whatever authority his voice could muster. "You there," he called out, injecting as much command into his tone as he could manage. "I would speak with you about your wares." The trader turned, his piggy eyes narrowing with suspicion and then lighting with greed as he assessed this potential customer. "Well met, traveler. Come to acquire some quality labor for your holdings. I have the finest selection in 3 territories, all legally bound and documented." Idris approached slowly, keeping his face neutral as he scanned the line of slaves. Up close, their condition was even worse than he had thought. Many bore the marks of beatings, and all looked half-starved. His eyes returned to the orc woman, who was now watching him with wary intensity. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something else he could not quite name. Pride, perhaps, or maybe just the last ember of hope refusing to be extinguished. "That one," he said, nodding toward her. "What is her contract term?" The trader's expression soured. "Ah, that one. More trouble than she is worth, if I am being honest with you, friend. Defiant, stubborn, refuses to accept her station. I have had her for 3 months and have yet to break her properly. But she is strong, I will give her that. Good for heavy labor if you have the stomach to discipline her appropriately." "The term," Idris repeated, his voice hardening. 10 years remaining on her contract," the trader said, consulting a grimy ledger he pulled from his coat. "Bound for theft, though between you and me, I suspect she was framed. The orcs often are in the human settlements, makes for easy profit when the magistrates want to clear them out. He said this with a casual shrug, as if discussing the weather. 10 years. Idris felt his heart sink. The cost would be substantial, far more than he could afford. He had left the army with a modest pension and some savings, but most of that had gone to helping his sister's family when illness struck their farm. He had maybe 200 silver crowns left to his name, enough to sustain him through a hard winter if he was careful, but certainly not enough to purchase a 10-year contract. How much? He asked anyway. The trader's eyes gleamed. For 10 years of prime labor, 800 silver crowns. A bargain, truly, considering her strength. Why, in 5 years she will have earned you twice that back if you put her to proper work. 800. Idris felt the impossibility of it settle over him like a shroud. He had known it would be expensive, but hearing the number made the situation crystal clear. He should walk away. He should continue on to the town, find work, rebuild his savings, and focus on his own survival. Getting involved in the fate of a contract slave he did not know made no practical sense. He looked at the orc woman again. She was staring at him now, and for just a moment their eyes met. In that instant, he saw something that reminded him of himself years ago, when he had been captured during a border skirmish and held for ransom. He remembered the helplessness, the rage, the desperate hope each time someone approached his cage that this might be deliverance. Someone had paid his ransom eventually, a captain who had no obligation to do so but did it anyway because it was the right thing. Idris had sworn then that if he ever had the chance to be that person for someone else, he would take it. "I have 200 crowns," he said quietly. "It is all I have in the world." The trader laughed, a wet wheezing sound. 200. "Friend, I could not let her go for less than 700. She is worth far more than your paltry offer. Come back when you have real money." He turned dismissively and began to walk away. "Wait." Idris did not know what made him say it, but the word came out sharp and desperate. "You said she is more trouble than she is worth. You said you have not been able to break her. How many other buyers have you found for her in 3 months? The trader paused and turned back slowly. "What is your point?" "My point is that she is a risk, a bad investment for most buyers. They want compliant labor, not someone who will fight them every step. You know it, or you would not have been so quick to point out her flaws. So here is my offer. I will take her off your hands for 200 crowns right now, in silver, no haggling. You lose the potential of a bigger sale, but you gain immediate profit and rid yourself of a problem. And if you think about it, you know that with her attitude, you might never find a buyer willing to pay full price. She could be dead weight for you for years." The silence stretched out. Idris could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his coin purse at his belt. Everything he had, his entire future, gambled on a moment of compassion for a stranger. Finally, the trader spat into the mud. "You drive a hard bargain, friend, but I see your point. She is more trouble than profit at this rate." He scratched his chin, and Idris could practically see him calculating the odds. 200 crowns and you take her contract as is. No refunds, no complaints if she proves unmanageable. And you sign the transfer papers right here, witnessed and sealed. "Agreed," Idris said before he could think better of it. He reached for his coin purse with hands that barely trembled and began counting out silver crowns into the trader's greedy palm. 100, 150, 190, 200. The last of his money, gone in a matter of heartbeats. The trader pocketed the coins with practiced efficiency and produced a set of documents from his coat. Idris read them quickly, his eyes scanning the legal language. It was all standard contract law. The orc woman, named Thara according to the papers, was bound to him for 10 years of service in exchange for room, board, and basic necessities. At the end of the term, she would be released with no further obligation. There were clauses about treatment and discipline, all of them making his skin crawl, but he signed where indicated and pressed his thumb into the wax seal. "She is yours," the trader said, producing a key and moving to unlock Thara's shackles from the main chain. "And good riddance. You will regret this purchase, mark my words." The chains fell away, and Thara stood free of the line, though heavy iron cuffs still encircled her wrists and ankles. The trader did not bother to remove those, just handed Idris a smaller key. "For the restraints. I recommend keeping them on until you have her properly secured wherever you are taking her." Idris took the key without comment. The trader and his miserable caravan moved on down the road, leaving him standing in the cold morning with a freshly purchased contract slave who was watching him with those fierce, unreadable eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Idris held up the key. "I am going to remove these," he said quietly. "But first I need to tell you something. I did not buy your contract to own you or to put you to work. I bought it because I could not walk away and leave you in chains. I do not expect anything from you. I do not have a farm or a business that needs labor. I do not even have a home right now, just the road and whatever work I can find. But you are bound to me legally for 10 years, and I cannot change that without finding a way to buy out the contract or wait for it to expire." Thara's expression did not change, but he saw her hands clench into fists. "So here is what I propose," Idris continued. "I remove your chains. You can walk away right now if you want. Go wherever you wish. Do whatever you will. Legally, I am supposed to hunt you down as a runaway, but I will not. Or you can stay with me and we can figure out what comes next together. Either way, I will not force you to do anything. You have my word on that." He could see the disbelief warring with hope in her eyes. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, her voice was rough from disuse but steady. "Why?" "Because I know what it is like to be helpless," Idris said simply. "And because I think we have all stood by and watched too much cruelty in the name of law and profit. I am tired of it." Thara studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was some trick or trap. Finally, she held out her wrists. "Remove them, I will stay. For now." Idris unlocked the cuffs and chains, letting them fall to the ground with a dull clang. Thara rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw skin beneath, and he could see the scars of old shackle wounds layered beneath the new. How long had she been in bondage? The contract said 10 years remaining, but that implied there had been time before. He did not ask. Not yet. "You have anywhere to go?" she asked, surprising him with the directness of the question. "There is a town about 10 miles west," he said. "I was heading there to look for work. I am a veteran, decent with my hands, good at repair work and general labor. I was hoping to find something that would pay enough to get me through winter." "You just spent all your money on me," Thara said. It was not a question. Yes, that was foolish. "Probably." Something that might have been the ghost of a smile flickered across her face there and gone in an instant. "Then we had better get to that town before we both freeze or starve. I am strong. I can work. If you need money, I will help you earn it." "You do not owe me anything," Idris said firmly. "I know," Thara replied, "but you just gave up everything for a stranger. That is either the noblest thing I have ever seen or the most idiotic. I have not decided which yet. Either way, I am curious enough to see where this goes." They walked west together as the sun climbed higher in the winter sky. Idris offered Thara his cloak when he noticed her shivering, but she refused it with a shake of her head. "You will need it as much as I do. I am tougher than I look." Her tone brooked no argument, so he let the matter drop. Instead, they walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of their feet on the frozen road and the occasional call of a crow from the bare trees. As they walked, Idris found himself stealing glances at his unexpected companion. Thara moved with a predator's grace despite her obvious exhaustion and malnutrition. Her posture was straight, her stride confident, and he got the impression that if danger appeared, she would face it head-on rather than flee. The slave trader had been wrong about one thing: she was not broken. Beaten, yes, worn down by circumstances beyond her control, but not broken. "How long were you with that trader?" he asked eventually. 3 months, like he said. "Before that, I was contracted to a miller for 2 years. Before that, a farmer. Before that." She trailed off and shrugged. "It does not matter. One master is much like another in the end." "I am not your master," Idris said quietly. Thara looked at him sharply. "You own my contract. What else would you call it?" "I call it a mistake in the law," he replied. "And a temporary situation, until I can figure out a way to fix it." They reached the town of Millbrook just past midday. It was a modest settlement, perhaps 200 souls, clustered around a half-frozen mill stream. The buildings were mostly timber and thatch, with a few stone structures that marked the wealthier establishments. A general store, a smithy, an inn, and what looked like a small church at the far end of the main street. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the smell of baking bread made Idris's empty stomach clench painfully. He had not eaten since yesterday morning. The reaction to Thara's presence was immediate and hostile. Conversation stopped as they walked down the street. Shutters closed. A woman pulled her children inside and slammed the door. An old man sitting outside the general store spat deliberately in their direction and muttered something about greenskins that made Idris's jaw tighten. "This is normal," Thara said quietly, noticing his reaction. "You will want to get used to it if you are going to travel with me." "I will never get used to it," Idris said, "and I will not accept it as normal." They made their way to the inn, a 2-story building with a faded sign proclaiming it the Silver Swan. Inside, the common room was warm and smelled of wood smoke and stew. A handful of patrons occupied the tables, and all eyes turned to the door when Idris and Thara entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and a face that suggested she had seen everything and been impressed by none of it, approached them with crossed arms. "We do not serve orcs here," she said flatly. "You will have to take your slave around back if you need to water and feed it." Idris felt Thara tense beside him, but she said nothing. He stepped forward, keeping his voice level. "She is with me, and she is not in it. If you have rooms available, I would like to rent one for the night. If not, we will take our business elsewhere." "You will find the same reception elsewhere in Millbrook," the innkeeper said. "Maybe worse. We have had trouble with orc raiders in years past. People here do not forget that." "She is not a raider," Idris said, his patience wearing thin. "She is a person who has been treated abominably, and all I am asking for is a room, a meal, and basic human decency. If you cannot provide that, then say so plainly and we will leave." The innkeeper studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. "You are a veteran. I can see it in the way you stand, the way you speak. My husband was a soldier once, died in the border wars 10 years back." She glanced at Thara, and something in her face softened fractionally. "Against orcs, as it happens. But he always said that war makes enemies of people who might have been friends in different times." "I am sorry for your loss," Idris said sincerely. The innkeeper nodded. "One night, 1 silver crown for the room, another for meals. You keep to yourselves, and I will deal with any complaints from the other patrons. But if there is trouble, you leave." "Understood." "Understood," Idris agreed. He reached for his coin purse and then remembered with a sinking feeling that it was empty. He had given everything to the slave trader. Thara saw his expression and understood immediately. She turned to the innkeeper. "We have no money, but I can work. I am strong and tireless. Give us one night's shelter and food, and I will do whatever labor you need. Clean, chop wood, haul water, muck stables. Anything." The innkeeper looked her up and down, considering. "The woodshed needs restocking before the next snow. If you can split and stack 2 cords of wood before nightfall, you have a deal. There is an axe in the back. The wood pile is obvious." "Done," Thara said without hesitation. They were shown to a small room upstairs, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it was warm and dry. As soon as the door closed, Idris turned to Thara. "You do not have to do this. I will find another way." "You spent everything you had to free me from those chains," Thara said, already moving toward the door. "The least I can do is split some wood so we do not freeze tonight. Besides, I have not done honest work I cannot remember how long. It will feel good to labor for something other than fear of the lash." Before he could argue further, she was gone. Idris stood in the small room feeling useless and frustrated. He had meant to free her, to give her choices, and instead, she was working to provide for them both because of his impulsive decision. He splashed cold water on his face from the washstand and then headed back downstairs. If Thara was going to work, the least he could do was find a way to contribute as well. He found the innkeeper in the kitchen, overseeing a young girl who was stirring a large pot of stew. "I can work too," he said. "I have no money to pay you properly, but I am good with repairs. If you have anything that needs fixing, I can do it in exchange for our keep." The innkeeper considered this. "The shutters on the east side are coming loose. Winter wind is getting through and making those rooms unrentable. If you can fix them properly, I will throw in a second night's stay and breakfast tomorrow." "Done," Idris said, echoing Thara's earlier certainty. He spent the afternoon working on the shutters, tightening hinges, replacing rotted wood, and making sure each one closed properly and latched securely. It was good, honest work, and he lost himself in the familiar rhythm of it. His hands remembered the skills from his youth, before the army, when he had worked with his father as a carpenter. As he worked, he could hear the steady thwack of an axe from behind the inn, a rhythmic sound that told him Thara was making good on her promise. When the sun began to set, he finished the last shutter and went to check on her progress. What he found made him stop in his tracks. Thara had not just split and stacked 2 cords of wood. She had split and stacked at least 4, maybe 5, a mountain of neatly arranged logs that would keep the inn warm for weeks. She was still working, her movements mechanical and tireless, sweat soaking through her ragged clothing despite the cold. The axe rose and fell with metronomic precision, each blow splitting a log cleanly down the middle. "Thara," he called out, "stop! You have done more than enough." She did not seem to hear him, or if she did not acknowledge it. The axe rose and fell again. Idris approached carefully and placed a hand on her shoulder. She spun, the axe coming up defensively, and for a moment he saw something wild and frightened in her eyes. Then recognition flooded back, and she lowered the weapon, breathing hard. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to." "It is all right," Idris said gently. "But you have done far more than the innkeeper asked. Come inside. You need to eat and rest." Thara looked at the massive pile of wood as if seeing it for the first time. I am not used to stopping. Slaves who stop working get beaten." "I forgot that I could." The simple honesty of that statement broke something inside Idris. He wanted to find every person who had mistreated her and make them answer for it, but that was neither possible nor helpful. Instead, he took the axe from her hands and set it aside. "You can stop. You can rest. No one is going to hurt you here, I promise." They went inside together, and the innkeeper's eyes widened when she saw the amount of wood stacked outside. "Lord above," she muttered, "I have never seen anyone work like that." "You have earned your keep 3 times over, Greenskin, whatever else I might think of your kind." It was not exactly a warm welcome, but it was better than the open hostility from earlier. They were given bowls of thick stew and fresh bread, and Idris watched as Thara ate with the focused intensity of someone who had gone hungry far too often. She finished her bowl in minutes, and then hesitated, clearly wanting more but unsure if she was allowed to take it. "You can have as much as you want," the innkeeper said gruffly, having noticed the hesitation. "Anyone who works that hard has earned a full belly." Thara ate 3 more bowls before finally slowing down. Idris ate more modestly, his own stomach having shrunk from too many lean days. As they ate, some of the tension drained from Thara's shoulders, and he saw her truly relax for perhaps the first time since he had met her. That night, they returned to the small room. There was only one bed, and Idris immediately moved to take a blanket and make a place on the floor. "You take the bed," he said. "You have earned it." "We can share," Thara said practically. "It is cold, and we will both sleep better with shared warmth. I will not bite, and I trust you will not try anything inappropriate." Idris hesitated, but the logic was sound, and he was too tired to argue. They lay down on opposite sides of the narrow bed, carefully maintaining a respectful distance. The room was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight through the window. For a long time, neither spoke. "Why did you really do it?" Thara asked finally, her voice soft in the darkness. "By my contract. No one does something like that without wanting something in return." "I told you the truth," Idris said. "I know what it is like to be helpless. I was a prisoner once during the war. Someone paid my ransom when they did not have to. I have been trying to repay that debt ever since, even if not to the same person." "What happened to you?" Thara asked. "In the war." Idris was quiet for a moment, old memories rising like ghosts. "I was captured during a skirmish on the northern border. The enemy was going to execute all the prisoners at dawn to make an example. But one of their commanders, an old warrior with more honor than sense, refused to allow it. He argued that prisoners should be ransomed, not murdered. Eventually, my own people paid to get us back, but it was that enemy commander who kept me alive long enough for it to matter. He did not have to do that. We were enemies, but he saw us as people first." "Was the enemy orcs?" Thara asked, though she sounded like she already knew the answer. "Yes," Idris admitted. "The commander was an orc named Grath. I never forgot what he did, or the fact that he was executed by his own people for showing mercy to humans. They called him a traitor. I called him the most honorable enemy I ever faced." Thara was silent for a long time after that. When she finally spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "My clan was wiped out 8 years ago. Humans came in the night and burned our village. I do not know if we had done something to provoke them or if they just wanted our land. I was 16. I survived only because I was out hunting when it happened. When I came back, everyone I loved was dead or dying. The humans who found me sold me to a contract house rather than kill me outright. I have been passed from master to master ever since." "I am sorry," Idris said, knowing the words were inadequate but not knowing what else to say. "I am so sorry that happened to you." "It is not your fault," Thara replied. "You are not responsible for what other humans have done, any more than I am responsible for what other orcs have done. But it is why I find it so hard to trust. Every human I have known since that night has seen me as something to be used or destroyed. You are the first who has treated me like a person." "You are a person," Idris said firmly. "Never doubt that." Thara reached across the small distance between them and found his hand in the darkness. She squeezed it once briefly and then let go. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing that, for seeing me." They slept then, the exhaustion of the day finally claiming them both. For the first time in longer than either could remember, they slept without fear, without chains, and with the tentative beginning of something that might one day become trust. Morning came too quickly, and with it, a new problem. The innkeeper provided them with a modest breakfast, but once they had eaten, Idris realized they had nowhere to go and no money to get there. Winter was deepening, and the roads would soon be impassable. They needed to find work and shelter, but in a town that barely tolerated Thara's presence, the prospects looked grim. "I have a proposition," the innkeeper said as they were preparing to leave. "You both work harder than any 3 people I have seen in years. If you are willing to stay on for the winter, I can offer you room, board, and a small wage. The girl can do the heavy labor and you can do repairs and help with the guests. It is not much, but it is honest work, and you will have a roof over your heads." Idris looked at Thara, who nodded slightly. "We accept," he said, "and thank you. This is more generous than we had any right to expect." "Do not thank me yet," the innkeeper said dryly. "You will earn every copper, and do not think the town is going to suddenly accept your greenskin companion. But if you keep your heads down and do your work, people will tolerate her presence. That is the best you can hope for here." So began an unexpected winter. Idris and Thara fell into a routine of work and quiet companionship. She handled the heavy labor, hauling water from the well, chopping and stacking firewood, moving supplies, and doing any task that required strength and endurance. He took care of the skilled work, repairs, minor construction, negotiating with suppliers, and dealing with guests. The innkeeper, whose name they learned was Meredith, was a fair employer if not a warm one, and she kept her promise to deal with any guests who caused trouble over Thara's presence. As the weeks passed, Idris found himself watching Thara with growing admiration. She approached every task with the same unwavering diligence, never complaining, never shirking, always giving more than was asked. But more than that, he began to see glimpses of the person beneath the scars and defensive walls. She had a quiet sense of humor that emerged in dry observations about the guests or absurd situations. She was whip-smart, learning tasks after being shown only once and often finding more efficient ways to do things. And she had a gentleness that surprised him, like the morning he found her carefully nursing an injured sparrow back to health, her large hands cradling the tiny creature with infinite care. The town slowly, grudgingly, began to accept their presence. It helped that Thara went out of her way to be helpful, often volunteering to assist with tasks beyond the inn. When a snowstorm damaged the church roof, she was up on a ladder the next day helping with repairs despite the cold. When an elderly neighbor could not carry water anymore, Thara quietly started doing it for her, refusing any payment. Acts of service became her language, the only way she knew to prove her worth in a world that told her she had none. Idris saw the toll it took on her, though. She drove herself relentlessly, sleeping little, eating less than she should, always pushing to do more, be more, prove more. One evening, about 2 months into their stay at the Silver Swan, he confronted her about it. "You are going to work yourself to death," he said, finding her in the woodshed long after dark, still splitting logs by the light of a single lantern. "Thara, please, stop." "I cannot," she said, the axe falling again. "If I stop, if I am not useful, then what am I? Why did you spend everything you had on me if I cannot at least repay that debt through work?" "I did not buy you to put you to work," Idris said, frustration and concern making his voice sharp. "I bought you to free you, But you are still living like a slave, still acting like you have to earn the right to exist. You do not. You are worth something just by being alive, just by being you. That is easy for you to say, Thara shot back, finally stopping and turning to face him. You are human. You have always had value just by existing. I am an orc. My people are monsters in your stories, savages in your histories, and slaves in your laws. The only value I have is what I can provide through labor. That is the only language your world understands when it comes to me. That is not the language I speak, Idris said quietly. And I am not asking you to be useful. I am asking you to be my friend. I am asking you to trust that I meant what I said that first day. You do not owe me anything. Thara's expression crumbled, and for a moment he thought she might cry. But she caught herself, blinking rapidly and turning away. I do not know how to do that, she admitted in a voice barely above a whisper. I do not know how to just be, without purpose, without value, without constantly proving I deserve to take up space in the world. Idris stepped closer and gently took the axe from her hands. Then let me teach you, starting now. You are done working for today. Come inside, sit by the fire, and do nothing. Do not clean, do not mend, do not plan tomorrow's tasks. Just sit and rest and let yourself exist without purpose for one evening. Can you do that? For me? Thara looked at him for a long moment, and he could see the war playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded. I can try. They went inside and sat by the fire in the common room. It was late, and the guests had all retired, leaving them alone with the crackling flames and the quiet sounds of the inn settling for the night. Idris poured them both cups of mulled wine that Meredith had left warming by the hearth, and they sat in companionable silence. Tell me something about yourself, Idris said eventually. Not about your work or your past as a slave, something from before, something that made you happy. Thara thought about this for a long time, her eyes distant. I like to sing, she said finally. In my clan, before everything, I was training to be a memory keeper. We memorized our history and sang it so it would not be forgotten. I had a good voice, they said, strong and clear. I have not sung since the night my clan died. I do not know if I even remember how anymore. Would you sing for me now? Idris asked gently. If you want to, no pressure. Thara hesitated, then shook her head. I do not think I can, not yet, but maybe someday. Someday is good enough, Idris said. He found himself watching the firelight play across her features, highlighting the strong line of her jaw, the curve of her tusks, the way her dark eyes reflected the flames. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the delicate way human society prized, but in the way a mountain was beautiful. Strong, enduring, and shaped by hardship into something magnificent. The realization troubled him. This was not the time for such thoughts. Thara was still healing, still learning to trust, still bound to him by a contract she had no choice in. Any romantic interest on his part would be an abuse of the power dynamic between them, and he refused to be that person. So he pushed the thought aside and focused instead on being the friend she needed. Winter deepened, and the snow piled high around Millbrook. The roads became impassable, cutting the town off from the outside world. It was during this time that Idris and Thara grew closer, spending long evenings by the fire talking about everything and nothing. He learned that she loved stories, that she had a mind for strategy and tactics that would have made her a formidable warrior, and that she missed the stars more than anything. We used to sleep under the open sky in my clan, she told him. I have not seen the stars properly in years. There are always walls now, always ceilings. I miss the feeling of being small beneath something vast and infinite. He told her about his family, about growing up as the youngest of 4 siblings, about his decision to join the army when the farm could not support them all, about the things he had seen and done in the war that still haunted him. "I killed people," he said quietly one night. "Orcs, mostly, but others too. I told myself it was duty, that I was protecting my homeland, but how many of them were just like you? Just people trying to survive in a world that wanted them dead or enslaved." "You cannot change the past," Thara said. "You can only choose what you do now. And right now you are choosing to be kind. That matters." As winter wore on, Idris noticed subtle changes in Thara. She smiled more easily. She began to volunteer opinions instead of waiting to be asked. She started taking time for herself, reading books borrowed from the inn's small library or sitting by the window watching the snow. She was healing, slowly but surely, and it was one of the most beautiful things he had ever witnessed. It was also during this time that trouble found them. A group of travelers arrived one evening, forced off the road by a sudden blizzard. They were rough men, mercenaries by the look of them, and they brought with them an air of violence that set Idris's instincts on edge. They drank heavily and talked loudly, and it was not long before their attention turned to Thara. "Look at this," one of them said, a scarred man with broken teeth. "The innkeeper has herself a greenskin pet. How much to rent it for the night, old woman? I could use some entertainment." Meredith's face went stony. "She is not for rent. She is a guest here, same as you, and you will treat her with respect or you will find yourselves back out in the snow." "Guest?" Another mercenary laughed. "It is a slave, and slaves are property. If its master does not mind sharing, what business is it of yours?" Idris stood up from where he had been sitting near the fire. "I am her contract holder," he said, his voice cold and hard, "and I do mind. She is under my protection. Touch her, insult her, or even look at her wrong, and you will answer to me." The scarred mercenary looked him up and down and grinned. "Big words from one man. There are 5 of us, soldier boy. Want to reconsider that challenge?" "No," Idris said simply. He had no weapon except his belt knife, and he was outnumbered and outmatched. But he had faced worse odds in the war, and he would be damned if he let these men harm Thara. He could see her in his peripheral vision, tense and ready to fight, and he prayed she would not do anything rash. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. The mercenaries were sizing him up, calculating their odds when Meredith stepped between them, a heavy iron poker from the fire in her hands. "Enough," she said flatly. "This is my inn, and I will not have violence under my roof. You men can sleep it off and leave at first light, or you can leave right now. Choose." The mercenaries grumbled but backed down, perhaps recognizing that between Idris's obvious military training, Thara's intimidating size, and Meredith's cold fury, they were not going to get what they wanted without a fight they might not win. They retreated to their rooms, and the common room slowly relaxed. "Thank you," Thara said quietly to Idris once they were alone. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Idris said. "I told you I would protect you, and I meant it. You could have been hurt, killed even. There were 5 of them. And I would fight 50 if I had to," Idris said, surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. "Thara, you are not just my responsibility. You are my friend. I care about what happens to you. I am not going to let anyone hurt you, not while I have breath in my body." Thara looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek, her palm warm and rough against his skin. "You are a strange man, Idris Irvine, but I am glad the gods saw fit to put you on that road the day I needed you most." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Then Thara withdrew her hand and stepped back, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, a door opening just a crack onto possibilities neither had dared to consider before. The mercenaries left at first light as Meredith had ordered, and life at the Silver Swan returned to its quiet routine. But Idris found himself increasingly aware of Thara in ways he had not been before. The way she laughed at something silly, one of the guests said. The way she hummed tunelessly while working, not quite singing but getting closer. The way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he was not watching, her expression soft and wondering. He was falling for her. The realization came to him one morning while watching her carry water from the well, her breath misting in the cold air, her movements efficient and graceful despite the weight of the buckets. He was falling in love with an orc woman bound to him by a contract he had bought to free her, and he had no idea what to do about it. The problem was the contract itself. As long as Thara was legally bound to him, anything he said or did could be interpreted as an abuse of power. She might feel obligated to reciprocate any feelings he expressed, not because she wanted to, but because she felt she had to. The thought made him sick. He would not put her in that position. Which meant he needed to find a way to free her from the contract, truly and completely, before he could even think about pursuing anything more. But how? The contract was legally binding for 10 years, and he had no money to buy it out. He could wait the full term, but that was a decade away, and who knew where either of them would be by then? He could default on the contract by failing to provide for her, but that would make her a fugitive slave, hunted by the law, and he would not condemn her to that fate. There had to be another way, but he could not see it. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal muddy ground and the first green shoots of new growth. With the thaw came travelers again, and with them, news from the wider world. One such traveler was a young woman named Olivia Cartwright, a lawyer specializing in contract law. She was traveling the frontier settlements offering free legal advice to those who could not afford it, funded by a grant from a distant city's reform-minded guild. Idris sought her out immediately. He explained his situation, the contract, and his desire to free Thara from it without putting her in danger. Olivia listened carefully, taking notes in a small leather journal, her expression thoughtful. "This is an unusual case," she said when he had finished. "Contract slavery is legal, but there are provisions in the law for early release under certain circumstances. Typically, this requires either payment of the remaining term's value, proof of abuse by the contract holder, or successful petition to a magistrate demonstrating that continued bondage serves no legitimate purpose and causes undue suffering. Would a magistrate grant such a petition?" Idris asked, hope rising in his chest. "Possibly," Olivia said carefully. "The challenge is that you would need to prove that you are not benefiting from her labor and that the contract serves no purpose except to limit her freedom. Given that you have been living and working together, that might be difficult to demonstrate. However," she tapped her pen against her journal, thinking, "there is another option. If you were to formally declare before a magistrate that you renounce all claims to her labor and that you wish to release her from the contract, and if Thara herself testifies that she has not been abused and that she wishes to be released, the magistrate might be persuaded to void the contract early. It is not guaranteed, but it is possible, especially if the magistrate is sympathetic to reform." "How do I find such a magistrate?" Idris asked. "There is one in the city of Westport, about 3 days' ride from here. Magistrate Henry Sullivan. He is known to be progressive in his views on contract slavery. If anyone would grant your petition, it would be him. I can write you a letter of introduction and provide the necessary legal documents. You would need to present your case in person, both of you, and pay a filing fee of 5 silver crowns. 5 silver crowns. Idris did not have that much, but he could earn it. Winter work at the inn had provided him with a small wage, and Meredith had been generous with bonuses for exceptional work. Between his savings and what Thara had earned, they might just have enough. "I will do it," Idris said. "We will do it, thank you. This is more help than I dared hope for." Olivia smiled. "I believe people should be free, Mr. Irvine. If I can help make that happen, it is my honor to do so." Idris returned to the inn and found Thara mucking out the small stable behind the building. He waited until she finished and washed her hands, then told her everything Olivia had said. Thara listened in silence, her expression unreadable. "You want to free me," she said when he finished. It was not a question. "Yes," Idris said. "I want you to be truly free, not bound by any legal document or obligation. You should be able to choose your own path, go where you want, do what you want without any tie to me except the one you choose for yourself." "And if I choose to stay with you?" Thara asked quietly. "Even after I am free?" Idris's heart skipped a beat. "Then I would be honored," he said carefully. "But that has to be your choice, made freely without any legal or economic pressure. That is why I want to end the contract first." Thara nodded slowly. "Then let us go to Westport. Let us finish what you started that day on the road. And after, we can talk about what comes next." They spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the journey. Meredith was sorry to see them go, but understanding. "You have both earned more than I could ever pay you," she said, pressing a small purse of coins into Idris's hands. "This is for the road and for the filing fee. Consider it a parting gift and my thanks for the hardest work I have ever seen from 2 people." The journey to Westport was uneventful but pleasant. Spring was in full bloom, the roads were clear, and they traveled at an easy pace. Idris found himself hyper-aware of Thara's presence beside him, the way she looked around with wonder at the changing landscape, the way she paused to examine wildflowers or watch birds. She was seeing the world as a free person for perhaps the first time in years, and the joy in her eyes was almost painful to witness. They talked as they walked, about everything and nothing. Idris told her about his dreams for the future, modest though they were. A small piece of land, maybe, where he could build a home and work with his hands. A place of peace after too many years of violence. Thara talked about wanting to find other orcs, to see if any of her people survived, to perhaps rebuild something of what was lost. But she also talked about fear, about not knowing how to live in a world without chains, without someone telling her what to do every moment of every day. "I have been a slave for so long," she admitted as they camped one evening under the stars, finally visible to her without walls in the way. "I do not remember what it is like to make my own choices. What if I am free and I just do not know what to do with it? What if I have forgotten how to be anything except what I have been?" "Then you will learn," Idris said gently. "And I will help you if you want me to. But Thara, you have never stopped being yourself. Even in chains, even beaten down and exhausted, you never broke. That strength, that core of who you are, is still there. Freedom will not change you. It will just give you the space to be who you were always meant to be." Thara was quiet for a long time after that, staring up at the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I think I am starting to understand why you did what you did. That day on the road, you gave me a gift I did not even know I needed, the belief that I could be more than what the world told me I was. Even if this magistrate denies our petition, even if I am never legally free, you have already freed me in the ways that matter. Thank you, Idris, for seeing me, for believing in me, for being my friend when I needed one most." Idris felt his throat tighten. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You are worth believing in, Thara. Never forget that." They reached Westport on the 3rd day, and it was larger and busier than Millbrook, with perhaps 2,000 residents. The magistrate's office was easy to find, a solid stone building near the town square. Idris presented Olivia's letter and the necessary documents, paid the filing fee with Meredith's gift, and was told to return the next day for the hearing. That night, they stayed at a modest inn where the proprietor eyed Thara with suspicion, but accepted their coin without complaint. Idris could not sleep, his mind racing with worry about the hearing. What if the magistrate denied their petition? What if he decided Idris was trying to defraud the contract system? What if Thara was returned to bondage, or worse, sold to someone else? He must have tossed and turned for hours before he finally heard Thara's voice in the darkness. Idris, stop thinking so loudly. You are keeping me awake. Despite his anxiety, he smiled. Sorry, I am worried about tomorrow. I know, Thara said. I am too, but worrying will not change the outcome. Whatever happens, we face it together. Yes, Idris agreed. Together. The hearing was held in a small courtroom, with Magistrate Henry Sullivan presiding. He was an older man with kind eyes and a stern demeanor, and he listened carefully as Idris and Thara presented their case. Olivia's letter helped, lending credibility to their petition, and Idris spoke from the heart about his reasons for wanting to free Thara from the contract. I do not benefit from her labor, Your Honor, he explained. She has been my companion and friend, but I have never treated her as property. The contract exists only as a legal technicality, and it serves no purpose except to limit her freedom. She has done nothing to deserve continued bondage. She is hardworking, honest, and deserving of the same freedoms any person should have. I ask that you grant her early release so that she can live her life as she chooses. The magistrate turned to Thara. And you, Miss Thara, what do you want? Thara stood straight, her voice clear and strong. I want to be free, Your Honor. I want to choose my own path, make my own decisions, and live without chains. Mr. Irvine has shown me kindness and respect when no one else would. He has never abused me or forced me to labor against my will. If you grant this petition, you will not be releasing me from cruel bondage. You will be recognizing that I should never have been in bondage at all. The magistrate was quiet for a long time, reviewing the documents before him. Finally, he looked up. This court recognizes that the practice of contract slavery, while legal, is often applied unjustly and disproportionately affects non-human races. In this case, it is clear that Mr. Irvine has acted with unusual compassion and that Miss Thara has been a model of good behavior. Furthermore, I see no legitimate purpose served by continuing this contract when both parties wish it ended. Idris held his breath. Therefore, the magistrate continued, I hereby grant the petition for early release. As of this moment, the contract binding Miss Thara to Mr. Irvine is voided. Miss Thara, you are a free woman under the law with all the rights and protections that status entails. This court's decision is final and binding. You are dismissed. For a moment, Idris could not breathe. Then the weight of it hit him. Thara was free, truly legally free. He turned to look at her and saw tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened. Free, she whispered. I am free. They stumbled out of the courtroom into the bright spring sunshine, and Thara turned to him with a laugh that was half sob. I am free, Idris. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Idris corrected, pulling her into a tight hug. She hugged him back fiercely, and for a long moment they just stood there holding each other while the world went on around them. When they finally pulled apart, Thara's expression had turned serious. I need to tell you something, she said. Now that I am free, now that there is no contract or obligation between us, I need you to know the truth. Idris's heart began to pound. What truth? I love you, Thara said simply. I have been falling in love with you for months, but I could not say anything while I was bound to you. It would not have been fair. You would have always wondered if I meant it or if I was just trying to secure my position. But now there is nothing between us except what we choose. And I choose you, Idris, if you will have me. I know I am an orc, I know the world will never approve, but I do not care about the world, I care about you. Idris felt like his heart might burst. Thara, I have been in love with you since winter, maybe longer. I have been trying so hard not to say anything for the same reasons you have. I did not want you to feel obligated or pressured, but now. He took her hands in his, feeling the calluses from hard work, the strength in her grip. Now I can tell you the truth. I love you. I have never met anyone as strong, as brave, as fundamentally good as you are. I do not care what species you are or what anyone else thinks. You are the person I want to spend my life with if you will have me. Thara pulled him close and kissed him, and it was like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was tentative at first, then deeper, more certain, a promise of everything they could be to each other now that nothing stood between them. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. What do we do now? Thara asked. I am free. You are free. We have no obligations, no plans, no direction. We figure it out together, Idris said. Maybe we go back to Millbrook for a while, save some money. Maybe we find that piece of land I talked about and build a home. Maybe we travel and see what the world has to offer. It does not matter where we go or what we do as long as we do it together. Together, Thara agreed and sealed it with another kiss. They spent the next few days in Westport, celebrating Thara's freedom and making plans. They sent a letter to Meredith thanking her for everything and letting her know what had happened. They bought supplies for the journey back to Millbrook, including a small silver ring that Idris shyly presented to Thara as a token of his commitment. It was not much, but it was all he could afford, and Thara treasured it like it was made of gold. The journey back was slower, more leisurely, as they took time to enjoy each other's company without the weight of uncertainty hanging over them. They talked about everything, their hopes for the future, their fears about how the world would react to their relationship, the practicalities of building a life together in a world that did not want them to succeed. People will always hate us for what we are, Thara said one evening as they sat by their campfire. An orc and a human in love. They will call it unnatural, disgusting, wrong. Are you ready for that? Because I am if you are beside me, but I need to know you understand what you are choosing. I understand, Idris said. And I do not care. Let them talk, let them hate. They cannot touch what we have unless we let them, and I will never let them, Thara. You are my home now. Wherever you are, that is where I belong. Thara leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the fire in comfortable silence. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of the world below but bearing witness nonetheless to two people choosing love in the face of a world that would deny them that right. They returned to Millbrook to find that spring had fully transformed the town. Fields were being planted, animals were giving birth to new young, and there was a general sense of renewal in the air. Meredith welcomed them back with genuine warmth, surprising them both, and offered them their old room at a reduced rate if they wanted to stay on while they figured out their next move. Idris found work helping with the spring planting on nearby farms, and Thara continued to take on heavy labor jobs around the town. They saved every copper they could, putting it toward their dream of buying a small piece of land. It was slow going, but they were in no hurry. They had time and each other, and that was enough. As the months passed, the town's attitude toward them began to shift, slowly but perceptibly. It helped that Thara had proven herself to be hardworking and trustworthy. It helped that Idris was well liked and respected for his military service. But mostly, it helped that people could see the genuine love and respect between them, and even the most prejudiced hearts found it hard to maintain hatred in the face of that simple truth. There were still incidents, of course. One drunken farmer tried to attack Thara in the street, calling her a monster and an abomination. Idris stepped between them, his voice cold and dangerous as he reminded the man that Thara was under his protection, and that any harm to her would be met with consequences. The farmer backed down, and no one else tried anything after that. The message was clear. Thara had someone who would fight for her, and Idris had someone worth fighting for. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of hard work and warm nights filled with laughter and love. Idris and Thara had settled into a rhythm of life that felt right, felt like home, even without a physical place to call their own. They talked often of their plans, refining them, dreaming bigger. Maybe they would build a small farm. Maybe they would start a business, using Thara's strength and Idris's skills to offer services the town needed. Maybe they would just keep doing what they were doing, living simply and honestly, proving through their actions that love was not bound by species or society's approval. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the Silver Swan watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Idris turned to Thara with a serious expression. "There is something I want to ask you," he said, his heart pounding with nervousness. "Ask," Thara said, looking at him curiously. Idris slid off his chair and knelt before her, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside was a ring he had spent weeks crafting in secret, using techniques his father had taught him long ago. It was simple but beautiful, made of polished oak inlaid with small pieces of silver wire in a pattern that resembled stars. "Thara," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I know we have not been together long by some standards. But I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of you. You are my best friend, my partner, my home. Will you marry me? Will you bind yourself to me, not by contract or law, but by choice? I promise to love you, respect you, and stand by you for as long as we both live. What do you say?" Thara stared at him at the ring, her eyes wide with shock and joy. For a moment she could not speak, overcome with emotion. Then she slid off her chair to kneel with him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she said, her voice fierce and certain. "Yes, I will marry you. I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. You gave me freedom when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was unworthy of it. You gave me hope when the world had beaten it out of me. Of course I will marry you." Idris slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed there on the porch as the sun set, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the inn, Meredith watched through the window with a small smile, already planning the celebration she would throw for them. The wedding was held a month later, in the small clearing by the mill stream where the town gathered for festivals. It was a modest affair, attended by the people of Millbrook who had come to accept Thara as one of their own, along with a few travelers who happened to be passing through, and stopped to witness the unusual union. Olivia Cartwright made the journey from her circuit to serve as the legal officiant, honored to be part of such a momentous occasion. Thara wore a simple dress that Meredith had helped her make, dyed a deep forest green that complemented her skin. Idris wore his best clothes, cleaned and mended until they looked almost new. They spoke their vows under the open sky, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life brought. There was no mention of traditional gender roles or societal expectations, just two people committing to be partners in all things. "I promise to see you," Idris said when it was his turn to speak. "To really see you, not as an orc or as a woman or as anything other than the person you are. I promise to honor your choices, to support your dreams, and to always, always fight for you when the world tries to tear us down. You are my heart, Thyra, my home, my forever. I promise to trust you, Thyra said, tears streaming freely down her face. To let you in even when I am scared, to believe that I am worthy of the love you offer. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your friend. You freed me from chains, Idris, but more than that, you taught me how to be free. I will spend the rest of my life showing you what that gift means to me. You are my light in the darkness, my strength when I am weak, my choice, today and always. When they kissed as newly married partners, the small crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Even some of the more skeptical townsfolk seemed moved by the obvious love between them. The celebration that followed was joyful and genuine, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. For one perfect evening, the barriers between species and the weight of prejudice seemed to fall away, leaving only people celebrating love. As fall approached, Idris and Thyra finally found what they had been looking for. A small parcel of land on the outskirts of Millbrook, about 10 acres of mixed forest and meadow with a clear stream running through it. The price was reasonable, and with their combined savings plus a small loan from Meredith that they insisted on paying back with interest, they were able to purchase it outright. They spent the autumn building their home with their own hands, aided by neighbors who donated time and materials. It was not much, just a one-room cabin with a loft for sleeping and a stone fireplace for warmth, but it was theirs. Completely and utterly theirs, the first place either of them had ever been able to call home without qualification or fear. On the night they moved in, they lay together in the loft looking up through the window at the stars visible in the crisp autumn sky. Thyra's head rested on Idris's chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, both of them exhausted but deeply content. You remember that first day? Thyra asked quietly. When you bought my contract and set me free, I remember, Idris said. I remember thinking I was making a terrible mistake, throwing away everything I had on a stranger. I remember being scared and confused and having no idea what came next. Do you still think it was a mistake? Thyra asked. Idris tightened his arm around her. It was the best decision I ever made. Emptying my savings to free you, asking for nothing in return, it led to this. To you, to us. To a home and a future I never dared imagine. I would do it again in a heartbeat, Thyra, every time without hesitation. I was so angry at first, Thyra admitted. When you said you expected nothing from me, I thought you were lying, that it was some trick. No one had ever done something for me without wanting something back. It took me months to understand that you meant it, that you really did see me as a person deserving of freedom and respect. That was the moment I started to fall in love with you, I think. When I finally believed you meant what you said. I did mean it, Idris said. I still mean it. Your freedom was never conditional. Your love was never something I expected or demanded. Everything we have built together, it is because we both chose it. That is what makes it real. They were quiet for a while, just breathing together in the peaceful darkness of their new home. Then Thyra spoke again, her voice soft but steady. I am going to sing now. The song of my people, the one I told you about, the one I have not sung since my clan died. I want you to hear it. I want this house, our house, to be blessed with the memory of where I came from. I would be honored, Idris whispered. Thyra began to sing, and her voice filled the small cabin with a sound so beautiful it made Idris's throat tighten with emotion. It was a song in a language he did not understand, but he did not need to know the words to feel the meaning. It spoke of history and loss, of strength and survival, of a people who endured despite everything the world threw at them. It spoke of hope and love and the unbreakable bonds of family. And as Thara sang, Idris understood that she was reclaiming her past, honoring her fallen clan while building a new future. She was healing, truly healing, and he got to witness it. When the song ended, they held each other in silence, and Idris felt a sense of completion, as if the universe had finally aligned in the way it was always meant to. They had been through so much, faced so many obstacles, but they had emerged stronger together. The contract that had once bound Thara was now nothing but a piece of history, a reminder of how far they had come. And the choice they had both made to love each other, that was the truest bond of all. Winter came again, their first in their own home, and it was everything they had hoped for. They spent the cold months working on small projects, improving the cabin, clearing land for spring planting, and simply enjoying the quiet peace of a life built on their own terms. Neighbors occasionally stopped by with offers of help or to borrow tools, and slowly but surely, Idris and Thara became woven into the fabric of the Millbrook community. There were still hard days, times when prejudice reared its ugly head, or when Thara struggled with memories of her past. But they faced those challenges together, never once regretting the path they had chosen. They worked hard, saved carefully, and built a life that was modest but deeply fulfilling. As spring returned once more, exactly 1 year after Idris had emptied his savings to buy Thara's freedom, they stood together in their meadow watching the first flowers bloom. Thara placed a hand on her stomach, a small smile playing at her lips. "I have news," she said softly. Idris looked at her questioningly. "I am pregnant," Thara said, and watched as joy and wonder flooded across his face. "We are going to have a child." Idris pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you sure? How long have you known?" "A few weeks," Thara admitted. "I wanted to be certain before I said anything. But yes, I am sure. In about 7 months we are going to be parents." They stood there in the spring sunshine, holding each other and marveling at the miracle of it all. A year ago, Thara had been a slave in chains, hopeless and broken. Idris had been a wandering veteran with nothing to his name but a handful of silver and a conscience that would not let him walk away from injustice. Now they were married, homeowners, and soon to be parents. The journey had been hard, but it had been worth every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty. "What should we name the baby?" Idris asked, his hand joining Thara's on her stomach. "If it is a girl, I want to name her Hope," Thara said, "because that is what you gave me." "If it is a boy—" She paused, thinking. "What was the name of the orc commander who saved your life? The one who showed you mercy?" "Grath," Idris said quietly, understanding immediately. "You want to name our son after him? If we have a son, yes," Thara said. "To honor the memory of an honorable enemy. To remind ourselves that goodness exists in all peoples if we are willing to see it, and to give our child a name that represents the bridge we are building between our worlds." "Hope or Grath," Idris said, testing the names. "I love them both." "Just like I love you." "I love you too," Thara said, and they sealed the moment with a kiss, there in the meadow they owned, on the land they had built together, with the future spreading out before them like the endless sky above. The seasons turned, and Thara's pregnancy progressed smoothly. The people of Millbrook rallied around them with a warmth that surprised them both, offering advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, and assistance with preparing the cabin for a new arrival. Meredith was particularly excited, declaring herself an honorary grandmother and insisting on throwing a celebration for them. Even some of the people who had initially been hostile to Thara found themselves softening, curious about what a half-human, half-orc child would be like and cautiously optimistic about this new chapter in their community's story. On a cool autumn evening, as the leaves turned gold and crimson, Thyra went into labor. Idris stayed by her side through every moment, holding her hand, offering what comfort he could, and marveling at her strength. The birth was long and difficult, but when it was over and the midwife placed a tiny, squirming baby in Thyra's arms, every moment of pain was instantly forgotten. "A daughter," the midwife announced with a smile. "Healthy and strong, with her mother's spirit already." Hope was beautiful, a perfect blend of both her parents. She had Thyra's green-tinged skin, though lighter, and small buds where tusks would eventually grow. Her eyes were Idris's blue, bright and curious as they took in the world for the first time. Her hair was dark like Thyra's, and her little fingers were strong as they wrapped around Idris's thumb. "Hello, Hope," Idris whispered, tears running down his face. "Welcome to the world. You are so loved, little one, so incredibly loved." Thyra looked up at him with exhausted but radiant joy. "We made her," she said in wonder. "Out of love and choice and everything good we built together, she is our miracle." "She is," Idris agreed. He leaned down to kiss both his wife and daughter, his heart so full he thought it might overflow. "Our family, our home. Our proof that love is stronger than any law or prejudice or chain." They raised Hope with all the love and care they had to give, teaching her to be strong like her mother and kind like her father, to honor both sides of her heritage, and to never let the world define her worth. As she grew, it became clear that she had inherited the best of both species, orcish strength and resilience combined with human adaptability and charm. She was a bridge between worlds, living proof that the divisions society imposed were artificial and surmountable. The years passed in a rhythm of work and joy, challenges and triumphs. Idris and Thyra's farm prospered, their reputation as honest and hardworking people spreading beyond Millbrook. They took in other outcasts occasionally, offering work and shelter to those who had nowhere else to go, remembering their own desperate beginnings, and determined to pay forward the kindness that had saved them. Their home became a place of refuge and hope, a testament to what could be built when people chose compassion over cruelty. Hope grew into a bright, spirited child who charmed everyone she met, her innocent joy breaking down barriers that prejudice had erected. Watching her run through the meadow, laughing and free, Idris and Thyra often reflected on how far they had come from that cold morning on a muddy road when their paths first crossed. One evening, when Hope was about 5 years old and playing near the stream under the watchful eyes of her parents, Thyra turned to Idris with a contemplative expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had walked past that slave caravan? If you had kept your money and gone on with your life?" Idris thought about it seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at you, at Hope, at this life we have built, and I cannot imagine it any other way. That moment, that choice to empty my savings and ask for nothing in return, it was the moment my real life began. Everything before that was just preparation for finding you." "I think about it too," Thyra said. "Where I would be now if you had not stopped. Probably dead, most likely. Or so broken that death would have been preferable. You gave me back my life, Idris. More than that, you gave me a reason to live it. I hope you know that. I hope you understand what your choice meant, not just to me but to our daughter, to everyone we have helped over the years." One act of compassion, one moment of choosing right over easy, and look at everything that came from it. "We built it together," Idris insisted. "Your strength, your determination, your refusal to give up even when you had every reason to. That is what made this possible. I may have bought your freedom, but you claimed it, Thyra. You made it real through your choices every day after. They watched Hope playing, her laughter carrying across the meadow like music, and knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. The contract that had once bound Thara was long forgotten, replaced by bonds of love and choice that were infinitely stronger. They had built a family, a home, and a future from nothing but determination and a willingness to see past the divisions that society imposed. As the sun set on another peaceful day, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Idris took Thara's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Thara asked, surprised. "For choosing me back," Idris said. "For taking a chance on a foolish human who spent his last coin on a stranger. For loving me despite all my flaws. For building this life with me. For everything, really." Thara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their daughter dance among the wildflowers. "You freed me from chains I could see," she said softly. "But more importantly, you freed me from chains I could not see. The ones that told me I was worthless, that I did not deserve love or hope or happiness. That is the real gift you gave me, Idris. Not legal freedom, but the freedom to believe I was worth saving. I will love you forever for that, until my last breath and beyond." They sat together in peaceful silence as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had watched over their journey from desperate strangers to devoted partners. Hope ran up to them, tired from playing, and climbed into Thara's lap for a cuddle. Idris wrapped his arms around both of them, his heart full to bursting with love and gratitude. This was what they had built from nothing. A family, a home, a legacy of love that would echo down through generations. And it had all started with one man's choice to empty his savings for a stranger in chains, asking nothing in return except the chance to do the right thing. That single act of compassion had rippled outward, changing lives, breaking down barriers, and proving that love truly could conquer all. As they carried Hope inside for the night, Thara looked back at Idris with a smile that still made his heart skip a beat even after all these years. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Idris replied. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." And in their small cabin at the edge of Millbrook, with their daughter sleeping peacefully between them and the future stretching out bright with promise, they knew beyond any doubt that they had found what everyone seeks: a place to belong, a person to love, and the freedom to choose their own path. The contract might have bound Thara for 10 years, but Idris had freed her with his compassion, and she had freed him right back with her love. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts, and nothing in the world could take that away from them. Their story became something of a legend in Millbrook and the surrounding territories, told and retold around fires and in taverns. The tale of a veteran who gave up everything to free a slave, and the love that blossomed from that single act of kindness. It inspired others to acts of compassion, to look past prejudice, to choose mercy over cruelty. And though Idris and Thara never sought fame or recognition for what they had done, they knew their lives had meaning beyond just their own happiness. They were proof that change was possible, that love could bridge any divide, and that freedom was always worth fighting for. Years later, when Hope was grown with children of her own, when Idris's hair had gone silver and Thara's strength had finally begun to wane with age, they would still sit on their porch watching the sunset, holding hands like they had every evening since the day they built their home. And sometimes, when the light was just right and the world was quiet, Thara would sing the songs of her people, and Idris would listen with tears in his eyes, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them together. The contract had bound her for 10 years. He had emptied his savings and asked for nothing. But what they gained was priceless. A lifetime of love, a family built on choice and compassion, and the knowledge that they had lived their lives exactly as they wanted to, free in all the ways that mattered. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.